My name is Kimberly. I'm a 55-year-old retired educator from Chicago, Illinois. I have sarcoidosis, pulmonary hypertension, irritable bowel syndrome, thyroid disease, and psoriasis. I consider myself chronically ill. Sarcoidosis is a chronic illness. It's an autoimmune disease that causes the body to fight against itself. I was about 18 years old when I began to have neurological disturbances and later found out those were my first symptoms of sarcoidosis. The most difficult thing to do is work when you're chronically ill or once your illness progresses to the point of disability. I think finding employment or securing employment is very difficult. Maintaining relationships and socializing or participating in events is extremely challenging.
Thank you for coming back for another episode of Office Hours. I'm one of your hosts, D Smooth, and I'm not here alone.
I'm Nick. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Office Hours.
Yes, and I want to thank our beautiful guest, Kim. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Nick, take it away.
So, you're obviously a family member, and we want just to start with what would you say are the biggest obstacles for Black women trying to obtain quality health care?
Black women is one challenge, but there's a secondary challenge when you're Black and you're disabled. And then there's another tier of that when you're Black, disabled with a chronic disease. And I'm gonna break that down. Just Black women, there's a healthcare disparity that is very prevalent. Our complaints we have symptoms, they aren't addressed. It's hard for us to get testing. It's harder to find healthcare professionals that will actually listen to our concerns. Then as a disabled person with a chronic illness, when you're chronically ill, it requires you to have multiple doctors. So you're dealing with all these different doctors, and they have to be on the same page, and they have to be communicating and really addressing the symptoms in your disease process. So the thing that I found the most difficult is just getting health care professionals to even listen. Oftentimes you go into an office and they're at their computer, they're not listening to you at all. Or they don't understand that your symptoms are related sometimes to your actual disease process. So it becomes the challenge of, does this person understand your disease well enough to address your symptoms? And then the second part of that is, if they are well versed enough in your disease, are they willing? Are they willing to really go further? And then there's always this caveat of you're still a woman, you're getting older, or whatever's going on in your life, whatever part of your life you're in, then you are dealing with other issues that are happening that they kind of blame on your disease. So instead of actually running tests and getting the labs, etc., they're just going straight for, oh, it's probably sarcoidosis. So all of those things are very challenging. You have to be well versed, you have to do your research, and you have to be a good advocate for yourself.
So I got a quick question for you. So how is being disabled affect you in relationships? So not just like, I mean, you can talk about like having a boyfriend or whatever, but and also you could talk about a relationship with family. Yes.
I would say significantly.
Yeah.
Most of the relationships that I had prior to becoming ill, and I say that in a way because I actually was diagnosed in 2003, but I didn't get on oxygen until 2013. So even though I had a lot of battles with my disease privately, until I actually got on oxygen, that's when I noticed the serious change. And it's understandable in a way because many of our relationships are based on activities, are based on our interactions with events or things and our commonalities. So, for instance, I used to skate every weekend. Well, I can't skate on oxygen. So people that I were friends with, that I went skating with, or I did line dancing, that I went to the line dancing classes and lessons and kind of hung out with. Well, I can't do those things. I do a little line dancing, but not like I used to. And so for the most part, those relationships change drastically because you can't do those things. As far as more personal relationships, those are very challenging because oftentimes being ill, it's a heavy weight on your mate, and it creates this responsibility that maybe they just aren't able to handle.
Yeah.
And it changes your relationships greatly. But the biggest relationship that it changes is the relationship you have with yourself. Because you have to redefine yourself with this illness instead of just looking at yourself like, oh, I'm a skater, or oh, I'm an educator, oh, I'm this or I'm that. You can no longer define yourself in those terms. So you have to really, I found that the more you become secure with yourself, you're better able to manage relationships because those relationships change. And I would say most of the relationships I had prior, I don't have them anymore.
Yes. Yes.
And it's hurtful. There's a grieving process. But once you get through it, you get to the other side of it. It's bearable.
Yes. So I wanted to ask, what are some financial obstacles you had to face being disabled?
Initially, when I got diagnosed, I was working 2 jobs. I went back to school. And I was able to navigate life in a more quote unquote normal way.
Yes.
So I didn't feel the strain of that, with the exception of my hospital bills.
Yes.
Hospital healthcare is very expensive, and being sick is really expensive. Really, the only people I would say that can afford to be sick are very wealthy people. Because the medication, treatment, hospitalization, surgeries, very, 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 very expensive. Yeah. So that was a big part. But then once I became disabled to where I couldn't go to work, then the financial collapse occurred because life doesn't stop. And at the time that I ended up having to retire, I had 2 kids in college and one in a private high school. Yeah. So life didn't stop because I got sick. Yes. And so you have to really utilize every mean you have to meet those demands. And so for me, it did cause a financial collapse. Basically, I had to sell everything I had and do what I could to get my kids through school. And I had to regroup from that point. And it is a huge hardship because it's not just the hospital bills, the medication, it is also the ancillary things that you need. There's so many things that are over the counter. There's so many things, treatments, vitamins. It's so much that goes into being sick. So you really have to, if you don't have a lot of money, You got to really be creative.
When it comes to money, is there a change that you feel like from a legal or policy perspective that would make the most impact on your life?
This government has to address the price of healthcare, not just insurance, but treatment, the whole thing. It is so expensive to be sick. And most people, I would say, the reason they're so sick is because they can't afford the things that would help them be well. And I think in the government, especially this current administration, looks at disabled people as throwaways. And that is historical. Even if you go back to biblical times, lepers were cast off. People that were sick were cast away. And so if we began to look at people as if we could get this holistic healing, they could be not only a benefit to themselves, but a benefit to society as a whole instead of a castaway. So if we could support people in healthcare, and healthcare wasn't so inaccessible because of the financial means, I think you would see more wellness. And I think you would see people that are disabled be more able to do more and live a more fuller life, work, be real contributors to their families and support their communities. But what often happens is this castaway kind of mentality and system, and making it so inaccessible because of money. It creates this caste system where the disabled people are the furthest in the back of all of the groups. And so if it is addressed in a way that's more holistic, I think we would find that actually everybody would work out better, because people would be able to work, they would be able to, be contributors to the community at large.
When you talk about contributors to community and things like that, I think a lot of times we think about community, we think about the next generation. And even though it's not the large lion's share of people that are born disabled, you have a disabled son. And so when you talk about being contributors to community and next generation, how would you say raising a disabled child is like, or, what is the difficulty that you feel like you've encountered, in that journey?
The most challenging things were, which I didn't do a good job. I didn't talk about my son's illness to him. I dealt with things head on. So I said, if this happened, we address the thing that was happening. Instead of really talking about this is this disease, this is what it looks like, this is how it is affecting you, this is how it can affect you, and give him the tools to navigate life in a way that would be most beneficial. And so what I did was I talked about the disease, like, oh, you have sickle cell, but you are smart. You can go to school. You can be anything, and you can do anything. And not that those things aren't true, but there are some real realities in this world, because there is a utopia, but then there's a real world experience that I don't feel like I adequately prepared my son for, because unfortunately, when you go to a job, if you get sick, they have things in place like FMLA and disability for a longer term. But then at some point, there's a cutoff that says, hey, you've been sick quote unquote too much. But when you're chronically ill, you get sick. It may be 2, 3, 4 times a year. But when you get better, you are able to function normally, whatever normal is. You're able to do your job duties. But jobs don't account for that. And so I think one of the things that was a real unfortunate mistake is that I didn't adequately prepare my son for the realities of being a person that was disabled. And part of that was not really accepting myself. I was young. Had kids at 24 years old, and as I'm seeing him grow, I'm growing as well as a young woman. And I did not really accept that this will be a limiting factor for him. And how can you navigate that? And so that is very challenging even to this day. And the other thing was, I think a challenge was counseling. Like, I never found someone that really understood. He's a regular kid. He wants to do regular things, but he has these issues, these health concerns, these limitations. I never could find someone that could really talk to him and support him as he grew up with a disease and having to drink extra water, having to use the bathroom, or having pain. No one could address those things. And I don't know if I looked hard enough, but I really feel like that was something that I wish for all parents of children with disabilities to have community. And I really never felt like we had strong community.
Yeah. Yes. I wanted to ask, so like, what was like the process of getting the information on about your health, and how did you process, like, how did you keep going in life? Say, oh, I'm not gonna let this slow me down. I'm gonna keep going and achieving things.
Mm.
I didn't. I didn't at first. It was extremely painful. It was a painful process because I had hopes and dreams and goals, just like, it's not like I was disabled my entire life.
Yes.
So I was in my early 30s and I learned about my disease. I was really, really, really sick. I had some serious bouts for about 12 years, about 4 surgeries over that time. But I was always able to bounce back, but never at the old part. So you have the surgeries, you come back, but you're never as strong as you were before. You're feeling effects of your disease. But once I got on oxygen and went through 3 cycles of rehab, and I worked rehab. I went to rehab 3 cycles and also 2 cycles of maintenance, which is a lot for someone in rehab. But I did that because I thought I would go back. I thought I could get off oxygen. I thought, even though my doctors were saying this is permanent, you have 38% of your lungs are damaged permanently. They don't. And so and some of my bones and my back and different things. And it was like, what do you mean permanent? I kept thinking it has to reverse. And they kept telling me it is not going to reverse. But in my mind, it was really difficult. I did go to therapy, and I encourage people to go to therapy. And I went through 2 comprehensive therapy sessions along with physical and occupational therapy. And I did that because I am single. I did not know how to I had to relearn how to take care of myself, to pay my bills, to do things, this regular stuff. And then in addition to that, I had to get to a point of understanding that this was where I was. And that was really hard for me. I actually did get a diagnosis of adjustment disorder, which is oftentimes what happens with people that are in like the service and they lose a limb. They keep saying, I feel like or they're paralyzed. I can feel like I can feel something, and they're paralyzed. But somehow in their mind, they're thinking, yeah, I can. And so for me, it is still a process. There are still days I wake up and say, wow, this is your life right here. And you have got to accept it as it is. But I pray a lot. And I am honest with myself. That was one thing I would say, even up until about 6 years ago, I wasn't. I kept believing if I take this medicine, I used to take, that's why I said this is a process, because I took a lot of trial medications for years, some of which really damaged me because I was trying to get back to who I was, get back to work, get back to being a mom and the person I was, instead of just accepting where I was and moving forward from there. And so it took a lot of time, but it was intentional effort. And once I got in those programs and I really, and that's another thing, that's why I tell people go to therapy, go to rehab. Because these people are trained to tell you, hey, this is what this is, and you've got to accept this. And so once I accepted that what they were telling me, not necessarily my health prognosis, but I accepted that I'm not dealing with this properly, I was able to enjoy more of my life, because I spent years grieving my life. But then after a while, I began to enjoy. And I think the first step to that was one of my counselors actually told me, what is it that you're doing that you enjoy? And I couldn't think of one thing, because every day I was spending thinking about all the things I couldn't do. And for the first time, I started saying, I don't know, because I can't do anything. And she said, no, there are things you can do, but you're not doing it. What is it that you can do? And so I began to garden. That was something I did before I got on oxygen. Yeah. And I went back to doing it about 3 years ago, like really gardening. And it has brought me a lot of joy. Yeah. And as I did that, I actually started back learning some line dances. I can't be at no classes taking for hours, but I can learn a line dance and I can maybe do it for 1 or 2 minutes. Yes. No, it's not what I used to do. And no, it's not as fun as being on a dance floor for hours. Yes. But guess what? It brings me joy for those few minutes. And I would encourage anyone to go to rehab, go to therapy, and start enjoying your life as it is. Like right in the moment. What can you do today? And enjoy those things. Yes, yes, yes.
You talked a lot about the internal. So you spoke a lot about the internal journey, I would say, of acceptance, of just how you thought about yourself. Definitely. How would you say others, because I think of our lives kind of like a planet, we are the sun, but there are other people moving around us doing things. How did their movement affect your perception of your life, your perception of yourself, and your disability?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's kind of a loaded question. People treated me differently. Some ignored my disease totally. Not to be mean, but more so like if I don't acknowledge it, it's almost like I can treat her the same way. And I played into that for a long time because that plays into that not accepting your disease. But it has a lot of limits because you're not that person. You can't do those things. And so I had that. And then I had other people that they don't know anything about my disease. So instead of them actually finding out or even asking, hey, what's going on with you? Or they would make jokes, they would stare, they would make faces or make comments that were really not, I'm not even sure if it was intentional. I think some of them were kind of like not realizing that they were being offensive, that I'm actually having a problem. And I'll just give like a quick, for instance, early on, my hair started thinning from some medication I was on. And I would have people like, what you have nice hair, why are you wearing a wig? Or why are you wearing a hair pieces in the top? And it was like, this is not the conversation. Or what's going on with your nails? I lost my nails. Or why are you walking like that? I have some fibrosis and some problems in my hip. And so it affects how I walk, sometimes more than others. And so, or you trying to walk cute, or you trying to walk like, and it's like, you are so far from, and instead of just asking. And I think there are also some cases where people are extremely sensitive, but don't know how to relate to you. So what happens is I have to see myself away from all of that. Like I have to block all of that out. And I have to say, what is it that I can do that would make me feel like my best self? I take a lot of steroids, and gaining weight is actually a part of steroids, but it hampers my breathing, hurts my bones. So I try to do everything I can to control my weight. I try to exercise so when I stay in motion, I can stay conditioned. These are things I can control. If I get a sarcoid lesion on my face, I try to make sure I have the medication I need and I can make my face up. If my hair is thinning more or less, and I say, well, you know what? I'm just going to put a wig on. These are things I can do. And I have to be honest with myself and say, do you feel good about yourself today? Do you feel comfortable? And if my answer is yes, I can go out and face the world. That's the physical part. The internal part is a lot of work. It is every day saying, Kim, you're okay. This is hard. This makes you sad, or this makes you angry, but it's okay. You can still move about and be okay with who you are inside. And so I have worked really hard at becoming a better person. Because the more I find that the more comfortable I am with myself, the more comfortable I am around other people. And for the first time, I've been a Christian pretty much all my life, but I didn't actually read the whole Bible until 2 years ago, from cover to cover. And then I began doing a lot of devotions, a lot of positive affirmations, but connecting them to the scriptures, because one thing I find is I can't define myself, because if I define myself based on what other people think, or if I define myself based on what my past was, I'm going to feel bad. But if I define myself based on what God, the person that created me, says, then I find peace in it. And so I think the more I become comfortable with myself, it's easier for me to traverse the world and interact with other people, because when they are talking to me or saying or doing anything, I can say, oh, no, that's part of my disease process. Or, oh, no, I thought that was nice. I wasn't sure. And I don't feel bad about it. So it's really more of a process about how I feel about me, not about what they feel or what they think about me.
So Kim, before we get out of here, we would like for you to tell the guests like anything that helped you stay motivated and keep your spirits up. If it was a song, if it was a scripture, if it was a friend giving you some advice or anything, or a family member, just let the audience know.
I think it was all of those. I have music, and it's not just one genre. It's all genres of music that say, you got this. You're okay. You are enough. I listen to motivational kind of speakers and positive energy. I stay in spaces where there's a lot of positive energy. And one thing that has helped me a lot is, and I didn't speak about this before, but building community. I have built a community of people that are disabled. And at one time, I would have rebuked that. Like, I don't want to be around a bunch of disabled people, but they actually understand what I'm going through. They actually can relate to some of the things. And so, because of that, I have these safe spaces where I can talk about things I'm going through or not talk about it at all and just enjoy myself with people that understand where I am and I understand where they are.
Yeah.
And so all of those things play a part: scriptures, family, music, motivational speakers, and community.
Yes. Before we get out of here, I wanted to say thank you for being a guest and telling your story.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And I hope that I love the work that you're doing. I think it helps people not to feel alone in their journey. And so they can actually stay on their journey without feeling that heavy load of, I'm out here by myself with this terrible disease, with all these financial issues and health concerns. They can say, oh, look at this show. This show actually talks to real people that are dealing with real issues, and they're moving forward in their life. Not no perfect situation, but they're moving forward and sharing their journey. So I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate the work that you both are doing.